Do you have any idea how much government workers make? Some of the salaries will probably surprise you. Let's start at the bottom and move our way up to the top salaries. First, we have minimum wage. This isn't your state's minimum wage. This is federal minimum wage, which is currently at $15 an hour. And right now, in the federal government, we have 70,000 workers that make $15 an hour. This might seem like a lot, but you have to consider the government, they employ 2.1 million employees. So it's really just 3% of the workers that are on minimum wage. Now, roughly 25 to 30% of the workers in the government are considered blue-collar workers, and they fall under the federal wage system, which means that they're paid hourly, such as plumbers, welders, construction workers, and they fall under the federal wage system. Now, to give you an idea how much these workers can earn per hour, let's look into the Washington, D.C. area. Here, a WG1 makes $16.10 an hour. Moving up to WS18, that person would make $59 an hour. Looking at the chart, you probably notice that there's three categories. WG stands for wage grade, WL for leader, and WS for supervisor. Okay, so now let's look at the GS employees. About 70% of the federal government is made up of GS grade employees. So when someone's saying, hey, I'm thinking about getting a government job, the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is this person is trying to be a GS grade worker. For this type of worker, there are 53 different pay charts. It sounds a little confusing, but you have to understand these 53 pay scales, they're all based on what area in the country the worker is actually working in. What is their physical location? And this changes so much because of the cost of living in that area. For example, you cannot pay a government employee that works in Iowa the same as if they worked in San Francisco or New York City. The government would not be able to compete for top-level talent in these higher cost areas unless they could increase the pay some. But if you're a government employee and you're working in a rural area, or maybe you're far outside of a city, a major city is nowhere near you, then you would be using the RUS pay scale, which stands for the rest of the United States. So let's first look at an RUS pay scale and then compare it with a higher locality area. Looking at this GS pay scale, we can see a GS1 Step 1 earns $23,000 a year. Now, I've personally never met a GS1, and you probably haven't either. They're not a lot out there. Usually when you're talking about the bottom of the GS grades, the lowest I've seen is a GS3. All right, so let's see what we have on the high side. Here we could tell that a GS15 Step 10 earns over $170,000 a year. These are just the base salaries. I also want you to consider that most federal government employees, they have the opportunity to earn a performance bonus. This could be quarterly, this could be annually, or it could be both. A lot of times it's 3% of their base salaries, but it can be higher. All right, so now let's look at the highest locality area in our country, which is San Francisco. This area has a pay increase of over 42%. Look at this chart. We can see a GS1 Step 1 earns over $28,000 a year. And on the high end, we see a GS15 Step 10 earns over $176,000 a year. However, oftentimes in these higher locality areas where the cost of living is higher, government employees still struggle to be able to afford a house or afford a 3-bedroom apartment. So a lot of times they end up having to live about an hour away or 45 minutes away, and they have this horrible commute in order to get into their office, or they end up sharing rooms in order to command that higher salary. Next, we have the SES pay chart. This includes the executives that work for the federal government. And right now we have about 7,000, which is actually less than 1% of the entire workforce for the government. Looking at the pay chart, executive pay starts at $165,000 a year and goes all the way up to $226,000 a year. But there are some executives that make even more than that. If you look at this list here, we see that there are some medical officers in the government that earn over $400,000 a year. But of course, that is incredibly rare. So what does an average federal government employee make, and how does that compare with the private sector? In 2022, a federal government employee's average salary was $93,000 a year. Compare this with the average salary of $53,000 a year in the private sector. Now, if you're watching this and you're considering working for the federal government, but you want to earn at least 6 figures. You want to come in at least $100,000 a year or more. In fact, if your goal includes you earning $130,000 a year, I have come up with a few ways to get there. And if you want to know those ways, I want you to watch this video next. If you would like to see more videos like this, please click like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.